Well, we turn our attention now to the Supreme Court's decision around the eligibility of Donald Trump to be on the ballot for the US presidential election. There are many, many tens of millions of Americans hoping for either of the two possible results. So either way, this is going to be controversial. It's going to have a very, very big impact. And our North America correspondent, Julie Hartman, joins us right now to talk about it. Julie, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thanks for having me, Topher.
For the benefit of those who may not be political junkies, and certainly maybe not North American political junkies, as most of our audience here is Australian, can you bring us up to speed with what's happened to lead us to the point where the whole of the US is kind of waiting on tenterhooks for this decision from the Supreme Court?
Sure, I'll just say it's not even intuitive for those of us who are Americans and those of us who are American political junkies. But basically, what this comes from is that there is a part of our Constitution in our Bill of Rights which says that you are forbidden from holding public office if you have engaged in an insurrection. And so this is the 14th Amendment specifically, and it was enshrined in our law after our Civil War because basically people wanted to prevent slave owners, those who were in the Confederacy who wanted to secede from the Union to create, a slave country, from holding public office. So that's the origin of this law, this stipulation. And so what's happened, Topher, is that various states, including Colorado, have picked out this part of our Bill of Rights and said, well, it's right there. Donald Trump is an insurrectionist. And so thus, according to the law, he cannot hold public office. And so what happened today is that our Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, 9-0, even the justices who were nominated to the Supreme Court by Democrats agreed that this is ridiculous. And they ruled that basically Colorado can't do that. And it is up to Congress at the federal level to make a decision about what constitutes an insurrectionist, what that term means, and if Donald Trump fits the bill. But basically, most of us know this is just political persecution. This is just trying to put up roadblocks to make Donald Trump the next president. And thankfully, our Supreme Court sees right through it.
Well, there's a couple of things to this for me, and it's obviously made headlines all around the world. Here's a headline from Australia on this. The decision, if I'm honest, the decision was made on a bit more of a jurisdictional issue than a substantial issue. The Supreme Court has not ruled that Donald Trump did not engage in insurrection, although I don't think he did. But that's not actually the ruling here. The ruling is simply that the Colorado jurisdiction does not have the power to make such a decision. Do you think that this, obviously it's being trumpeted as a very, very big legal victory. Do you think that this helps Trump in terms of his fight against this idea that he is an insurrectionist?
I'm not sure if it helps in that category. I think Americans have pretty much made up their minds. Those who think he is an insurrectionist still believe that, and those who don't, haven't changed their minds either. But I do think this helps him. All of this persecution helps him politically. In fact, there is a columnist in the Wall Street Journal named Holman Jenkins Jr., and he contends that it is actually the Biden reelection campaign strategy to levy these ridiculous charges and political persecutions against Donald Trump, because Jenkins says that they want Americans to be incensed. They want Americans to put up Donald Trump as the nominee because the only way that President Biden thinks that he can win a second time if it's Biden versus Trump, because he thinks a lot of Americans will vote for him because they hate Trump. So in that category, I think all of this is helping Donald Trump. But as far as whether or not people think he's an insurrectionist, people have already made up their minds.
Well, I got to say, if that was an insurrection on January 6th, then that was one of the worst insurrections I've ever seen. And how a country with 400 million guns in it could have a bunch of people show up at the Capitol for an insurrection, allegedly, and all of them left their guns at home. At least the ones that went into the Capitol certainly left their guns at home. Just seems like one of the worst insurrections in human history. Trump, of course, has been quick to jump on this decision to claim victory. He went on the record here, the usual campaign trail sort of stuff. But there was something that really caught my attention in this speech, and we were just chatting about it prior to recording, Julie, and that is where Trump is arguing and urging the need for immunity for presidents. And to be clear about what he says in this speech that we're showing here, he talks about immunity for presidents for decisions they've made whilst president, but it's an ongoing immunity that applies while they are still the president and then continues to apply afterwards for decisions made while they were a president. He's obviously looking at this through the lens of the accusations being levied against him and the sort of legal pursuits that people have had of him. Do you think that that's the correct solution to this particular problem?
I can understand those who are hesitant to endorse that position. It seems like a draconian idea that a president can be immune from any decisions, no matter how terrible they are, that they make in office. But I actually think when Donald Trump is making this statement, yes, you're right that he's viewing it through the lens of the own political persecution that he is facing. But he's also aware that if he is granted immunity while he is president, then other presidents, including his opponents, are also granted immunity. So I really do think from him, it is coming from a principled perspective where he's saying, look, it's very difficult to be the president of the United States. You've got to make really tough decisions sometimes, and we need to feel like we have the freedom to do that without criminal liability. So I would at least right now support what he says in that assertion.
For me as a libertarian, I do find this a tough one. And you're quite correct. Trump has been very, very clear that this is not just about him. This is something that he believes should apply to every single president. So you're absolutely correct in that sense. It is a principled stance that applies to his opponents as well. But I've got to say there is a certain level of discomfort for me at the idea of some sort of a blanket immunity. I would love to find a more precise way that protects them from the tough decisions they do have to make. I mean, they do at times make life and death decisions. There's no denying that. And I would hate to think that they have in the back of their mind this fear of frivolous or vexatious lawsuits. On the other hand, immunity is a very, very dangerous thing to give to anybody. So I've got to admit that sits uncomfortably with me. Turning our attention to the campaign ahead, now that Donald Trump has the green light, of course, Super Tuesday is tomorrow, your time. It's today, ours, here in Australia, and we're going to see the race take a lot more shape. But Trump is the runaway nominee at this point in time for the Republicans. It does seem pretty inevitable that he's going to be the Republican nominee. The VP pick, I talked about that in my editorial just now. What are your thoughts on Donald Trump's VP pick? And in particular, I want to draw attention to Vivek Ramaswamy. I just talked in my editorial about the fact that he joined Trump at the Trumpettes event in Mar-a-Lago a couple of weeks ago in person. I was there and saw that. Do you think that's him telegraphing his VP pick, or is he just, I guess, reveling in the speculation and the attention that he can draw to his campaign by keeping everyone on tenterhooks?
I will answer this, but just a final quick note about immunity, because
Sure.
I really do understand your hesitation with it. I think what's hard for us as Americans right now is that we live in a country, and I know that you also have it in Australia, which is so heavily legalized, where there was a lawsuit recently where someone who ate too hot of chicken nuggets at McDonald's got, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, you can sue somebody over basically anything these days and get a victory. So I think that's a lot of why I support at least immunity, because I have seen how reckless and superfluous people are in the United States with their casual relationship with the law if they think that they can tank their opponents and make some money. So just wanted to make that point. But as far as the vice president, boy, you're not the only one with an immense amount of speculation. I do think Vivek Ramaswamy is at the top of the list for Donald Trump's VP. I happen to love the guy. I think he is immensely competent and brilliant, and he has almost identical values and policy positions to the president. But, I think as far as Donald Trump bringing Vivek Ramaswamy to Mar-a-Lago, I think he's taking the temperature of the voters, He's certainly trying to draw attention to himself, but I think he likes to bring forth many of these people who he is considering. He was also just at a rally recently with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, who's on his short list. And I think that's a smart way for him to gauge how people react to it. Because as a president, you want to pick a vice president who will complement you and who the voters may prefer in some ways if the candidate, has shortcomings. So I think it's just a little test on his part.
Well, it's certainly going to be very interesting. And for political junkies like me, a US presidential election year always promises to be a good year, full of things to talk about. So, Julie, I've no doubt we'll be getting you on many more times here on the Aussie Wire. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.